What is going on, Diesel Nation? We're excited to have you guys with us today on the Diesel Podcast. Today I've got Kyle from Hot Shot Secrets, and you've heard from him before on the podcast. He's chatted with us about fuel additives and also CP4s. Today he's going to be chatting with us about engine oils, different products that they have for your truck, whether you're towing, racing, or you're putting a ton of miles on per year. So there's a lot of questions we want to ask him, and just learn more about ways we can protect our engines. Before we get to it, though, I want to encourage you guys, make sure and jump on our Discord. We're almost at 200 people on our Discord server. It's a great way to be able to show your build, ask questions, engage with us, other podcast fans. There's a lot of really cool things you guys are working on out there. I love seeing the pictures, seeing the build list, and then if I can help answer questions or connect you with somebody who can, it's a great way for us to all be able to make sure we're building the trucks right the first time and making sure we're really happy with what we're doing with our vehicles. Also, if you want exclusive episodes, your truck to be the podcast cover for a month, tons of different perks that we offer. We have those available for our Patreon supporters. You'll find a link down below as well. I want to give a shout out to Whirly Custom Fabrication. They're a sponsor of the podcast. Really appreciate their support in what we're doing, and their parts. They have so many different things. Like the other day, I saw that they have traction bars, and traction bars are incredibly important to be able to protect our transmissions and the whole drive line. What they do also extends into the engine. They've got tons of different things with intercooler pipes, intakes, coolant tanks, and a ton of different colors. They make the products all here in the U.S. They're more than happy to chat with you about your build. They take pride in what they do. And I hear from a lot of guests that come on that are running their parts, how well they fit. And I know that's something that we all want is when UPS or FedEx delivers a part, we want to make sure when we go out there, on the weekend, we can, get the part installed. We don't run into any snags, and they take a lot of pride in doing that. So make sure and jump on to wcfab.com. You can check out what they have, give them a shot with any questions. For the shop owners out there, I know there's a lot of you guys that listen to the Diesel Podcast. So if you're not set up with Turn 14, go to turn14.com. They make it really easy to get WCFab parts and other products. And it's their process of ordering is so easy. I've had some shop owners, when I visited with them, they've been ordering parts, getting stuff for their stock, and they've shown me how super easy it is to just log in, see what's in stock, when you can get it. All their invoices are emailed, tracking, all that sort of stuff. So they take a lot off your plate with being able to get parts to your shop. All right, let's get to the podcast with Kyle and chatting about engine oils. Welcome back to the Diesel Podcast, Kyle. I always enjoy chatting with you, and I always learn a ton more than when I jump onto the podcast. So it's cool to chat with you today. And I know engine oil is always a really popular topic that our audience loves to hear about, and we haven't chatted about that yet. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So I'm excited to have you on.
Hey, thanks for having me, Patrick. Always have a good time. And yeah, we haven't talked about oil, so I guess we're due, huh?
Yeah. We've chatted about diesel fuel, how to save your CP4, and then the big one is always diesel oil, and there's so many questions around it because if you go into a store, you look online, there's so many different choices, and there's so many different ratings for them. I just kind of wanted to start at like the basic level is, what is out there? What do I as a diesel owner need to pay attention to? And then, we kind of transition that into what does Hot Shot Secrets offer for diesel truck owners?
Well, it's a big world. There's a lot to know. For the average guy, it can be, completely daunting trying to figure out the differences between a lot of these.
Yeah.
So how about I take you through basically how a diesel oil is built, okay, and from ground up. And to start it off real simply, it's base oil and it's additives. That's it. We have a base oil to carry everything and an additive package for different things like lubricity and wear protection and all that. So now to dive down into those two little things can get extremely complicated or, kind of simple. Now, I'm not a tribologist. We got them here, actually on the other side of the wall from me. But what I always try to do is try to put it into terms the average guy can understand. Because heck, I didn't know half this stuff when I started. So I've learned a lot, but I'm good at what I call unnerding it. So yeah, let's start with the base oil. Okay. It's probably the biggest misconception and on what a base oil is and the purpose of it. There's 5 groups of oils, and oil groups get a little complicated, but we're going to take group 1s and just completely take them off the table. Group 1s are pretty much a barrel of crude oil. It's unrefined, it's nasty, Nobody uses it. There's very few uses. I'll jump right to group 5s. Group 5s are off the chart. Those are esters. We use those in their high-end esters. We use them in oils, but they're not your base oil. Your base oils all fall into group 2, 3, and 4. So what a group 2 oil is a conventional oil. So that's your 1995 Midas oil change, your cheap dinosaur oil. It's a very unrefined oil. And what we're looking for in a base oil is really the shearability of it. How long can it hold up before it falls out of grade? So if your average truck that's got a 15W40 oil in it, that 40 weight oil is going to break down over time. If it's a group 2 oil, it's going to break down pretty quickly. That's why you have a smaller oil interval on a group 2 oil. Stepping up to a group 3 is a more highly refined dinosaur oil. It's but here's where it gets a little confusing. That's where the world calls it a synthetic oil. A group 3 oil technically is not a synthetic oil. So when you're at the auto parts store and you're looking at that whole wall of all those oils out there and you see conventional, semi-synthetic, synthetic, every one of those bottles that say synthetic, not a single one of those is synthetic. And there's a longer story behind that. This goes back to the 90s when really good oil came about, which is our group 4s. The group 4s are synthetic oils, and all the big manufacturers started turning to group 4s. Well, one of them decided they're going to put a group 3 out there and call it a synthetic oil. This went all the way to the Federal Trade Commission, and they just said, we're not getting involved. We don't want to decide what oil is. You guys figure that out. And that day, the whole industry changed and went to group 3s, and you never really saw group 4s again, because if they can get away calling a group 3 a synthetic, they're going to. So let's break down a little bit between what the difference is. I like to use really bad analogies, so and you know that I've given you a few in the past. So when it comes down to the film strength of an oil and the ability of it to not shear and come out of grade, which at the point when it shears, your 40 weight becomes a 38 weight, becomes a 35 weight. It's no longer protecting the engine. That engine was designed for a viscosity level of 40. So once it shears and comes out of grade, it's time to change your oil. That's why you get a shorter interval on a group 2 oil, because it's just a conventional oil. Now, my bad analogy that I always use is, imagine if we got a visual this time too. This is great. I should have brought the whiteboard. That'd have been easier. But imagine, the flat surface in front of you is, one of the pieces of metal in the engine, and we have another one on top of it. Now, I want to slide across this metal without touching it. That's what our lubricant's doing in between, is keeping those two pieces of metal from touching to reduce wear. Now, if we break down the molecular structure of a group 2 base oil, that carbon chain is going to look very irregular. I compare it to a bunch of balls that we would lay across the table here that we wanted to slide a surfboard across. I want to slide across without hitting the floor at all. Now, on a group 2, you might have a molecular structure where that carbon chain is a softball, and then a marble, and then a golf ball, and then a tennis ball, and then a softball. So they're all different sizes. And what that allows is, it's really tough to try to slide over that. And you can catch an edge pretty easy, if you will. And when you catch an edge and break that chain, well, that's how you dig into the metal there and start to have wear. And that's just because a conventional oil is very, very lightly refined. They go through a hydrocracking process on the base oil, and it just doesn't get to the point where it gives you a good film layer basis to protect for a long time. And as it breaks up, you start to lose viscosity and you lose your protection. The difference with a group 3 oil, which again, what the world calls a quote unquote synthetic oil, excuse me, is that the molecular structure has been more highly refined. It's been hydrocracked longer. It's been through a more thorough process. So now, instead of softballs and tennis balls and marbles, we're down to just say golf balls and marbles. It's a much more closer sized and symmetrical carbon chain. So when I'm riding that surfboard across, it's a lot easier to get across without, hitting into that metal. You still can catch an edge once you get over that marble and into that golf ball, but that's what allows that carbon chain to remain intact much longer. And that's why a Group 3 oil or a synthetic oil, you can get twice the interval on. You might go 10, 15, 20,000 miles rather than 5 or 10,000 miles, as you would on a Group 2. So here's where it gets really crazy. A Group 4 oil, which is what they call a polyalpha olefin, easier just called a PAO. A Group 4 oil is a true synthetic. So what that is, again, everything starts with dinosaur oil, but what happens with a Group 4 is it is broken down all the way to the ground. Every component of it is completely broken down rather than just being hydrocracked. And then scientifically, it is put back together and built back up into a carbon chain. Excuse me. This allows the chemists, when they build these carbon chains, to make it 1000% identical. So if you were to look at that molecular structure, now we're talking just lining this floor with BBs or little marbles, all the same size, 100% man-made, 100% identical. And now you are sliding across with ease, and there's nothing to catch on, there's nothing to break. And that's why a true synthetic oil, a PAO, can virtually last forever. It will not come out of grade. They haven't been able to make it come out of grade in a lab. And we'll get to some of the oils that we offer, but when you're talking a true Group 4 PAO, 100% PAO, you're talking 100,000, 200,000 mile intervals that without the oil breaking down. Wow. Now there's more to it when you get to the additive side of the package, but just on the base oil, a Group 4 PAO is light years different than what a Group 3 synthetic and a Group 2 conventional is. And that's the starting point. You got to start with that base oil. Does that catch you up on the base side of things?
Yeah,
I go deeper.
It really does.
Where'd I lose you?
It actually, that really helps to be able to understand it because it's so confusing. I see the term synthetic all the time and conventional, and I never really understood what the differences were between it. And then we hear, also, well, you got to change your oil every 3,000, 5,000, 7,000. And then we read about these other ones that are 10, 15, 20. So I think that definitely helps kind of frame the conversation we're going to have about the different classes of oils that are out there. And
absolutely. To your point there too, those are just names. The conventional and synthetic are just names. They again, synthetic oil really isn't synthetic oil. And to be frank with you, we offer Group 3 oil and we call it synthetic because the industry does. Yeah. And it's kind of frustrating, because we really know it's not a proper name for it. Now we also offer Group 4s and we make it very clear on the bottles that it's Group 4 PAO synthetic. But it's just kind of how the industry's gone. The average consumer doesn't know the difference. So when they're looking at, they just know conventionals bottom line and synthetics better, but the truth is it's just, they're the same thing. They're just a little more highly refined so that the carbon chain's a little tighter and lasts a little longer before it breaks down.
Now, if I'm looking to go with a certain, either like a class 3 or class 4, what as a truck owner should I use to make my decision which one that I want to run in my truck? Is it just as simple as I want to go longer with my oil change intervals and I want less wear, or are there certain things or certain types of truck owners that look for one versus the other?
Great question. When we're talking groups of oils in the base oil, it really comes down to one thing, and it's oil interval. There's some advantages to the shear strength and when it comes to wear as well, but for the most part, it's all about interval, because there's always there's three things that we run into when it's time to change your oil. Number one, we check to see, is your oil still in grade? Is it still a 40 weight? Is your viscosity still there? So we do this oil analysis. That's really, we're checking the base oil. How long are you looking to go, and how long can that oil hold up? The other two factors are when we get into the additive side of the package. The detergents there, they get depleted with the acids that build up in diesel oil, and also how dirty or how clean is it. We put soot in the oil with these diesel trucks, so those are different aspects. But to answer your question directly, when it comes to groups of oil, conventional, synthetic, PAOs, that's 100% about what type of interval you want to run. Now, I talk to people all the time about this, and they say, well, how long should I go? Or they'll ask specifically about our oils. How long does that oil go? We don't like to give that answer. It's like every truck is different. Every truck treats the oil differently. And then we have different additive packages for the type of use of truck, which we can get into. But right off the top, if you're the average Joe with a daily driver, maybe doing some towing, but not pulling a sled or drag racing, something like that. It's really how often do you want to change the oil? If you're one of those people that says, I'm going to change it. There's people say they're changing their oil at 3,000 miles regardless. Don't care. I'm getting out of there at 3,000 miles. Well, then there is no reason that you should go past a conventional oil. A conventional oil or a semi-synthetic, which would be a group 2, group 3 blend of the two, is going to get you far past a 3,000 mile interval. So if you were to put a full group 3 in or a group 4 PAO in, and you're only going 3,000 miles on it, well, you're just simply wasting money because that group 2 is going to hold up just as long. Now, if you're somebody that says, hey, I want to get 15, 20,000, 25,000 miles out of a oil change, well, a conventional is going to, that carbon change is going to break up before then. They're just not going to last that long. Can they go that long? Some can. It really depends on the application, but generally speaking, you're not going to see much more than 10,000 miles out of a conventional oil. Group 3s, they can go 20, 25, and depending on how that truck's used, they can go that long. So that decision comes down to how long of an interval you want to go. Now, the crazy part about the group 4s, and this is really the only reason why they were really created and why we have still been offering a pure group 4 for a while in our blue diamond oil, is for the extreme long interval guys. We have a lot of over-the-road truckers that are looking for extreme intervals. We have had trucks go 100,000, 150,000. We've just had a couple trucks go 200,000 miles on the same oil. And people are like, how is that even possible? Well, it's not as easy as just pouring a group 4 in. But like I said before, the 3 factors we look at to go in a long extended interval, well, first and foremost, you have to start with a full group 4 PAO, only because it's the only pure synthetic man-made carbon chain that will not break. So the oil will hold its film strength, it will hold its viscosity through 100,000 miles. And that's one part of it that we just kind of take off the table. So right there, that one element's off the table. We know the oil is going to be a 40 weight when it starts, and by the time you get to your interval, it's just off the table. What you're measured by are the last two parts. How dirty is it? All of this diesel oil gets dirty. Our trick around that is running a bypass filter. So you have to add a bypass filter to the vehicle, which is a secondary oil filter that will strain that oil down to 2 microns and get all the contaminants out to extend that interval as long as you can go. The third part is, like I said, the detergent package, which we'll get to next on the additive side of things. But just like the analogy I use is kind of like hand washing dishes. You put a little Dawn detergent in there, it foams up, and you wash some dishes. Well, after a while, you need to squirt a little more in. Same thing's happening in your diesel oil. It comes with a lot of detergents. It comes with a base level. Well, as you use up those detergents and our blow by with our soot and everything, you start using up the detergents. That base level starts to get combated with acids. And at some point, it's out of juice. It's out of cleaning strength. We have a unique product called a TBN booster. It's an oil additive that's like 1/3 CK4 package, a TBN booster, which is a base package, and our FR3 friction reducer, which allows that oil to be revitalized. So that's what we look for these long interval guys that are going 100,000 miles. It really takes a group 4 that won't come out of grade, a bypass filter to keep it clean, and then periodic oil analysis to check the detergent levels, and we spike them up with an additive as needed. So it's a whole different world when you get into that type of stuff. But there's not a lot of guys out there doing like the long interval stuff, and it's crazy when I tell people about this. They're like, "Well, who would do that? And why would you guys tell people that? Because don't you want to sell oil? You know, like you're telling a guy not to buy oil for 100,000 miles. You know, but the truth is, it's the best thing you can do for a vehicle. I mean, you know, especially with the bypass filter, that truck never sees dirty oil for the life of it. You know, and it's running a strong oil that's holding grade, and as long as you keep the detergent package up, no need to change. Keep rolling.
I think a really interesting part about the detergents that you mentioned is, you know, a lot of the listeners we have, or the questions we're getting about parts and products and trucks, they're from people that have a newer or 2007 and after current truck, and they're, you know, with the EGRs that are on them, they know, hey, I'm recirculating soot back into my engine. How can I try to get that reliability or limit the wear or extend the intervals on these newer trucks versus, you know, the 95 I had, or the 99.73 or the OBS or something like that, where there wasn't this active EGR valve pumping soot back over into my intake. And I think that's a great way to kind of lead into the additives and the detergent that you mentioned, and being able to keep that oil clean to protect the engine.
Sure. So we knocked out the base oil, and like I said, all oil is base oil and additives. So as you led into there, now we're looking at the additive package, and there's a few purposes for it. As you mentioned, to clean, to combat the stuff we're dumping in, especially a lot with the new emission systems that are putting a lot more into the oil than ever used to be. And those acids naturally build up in any single oil. So you always are battling base versus acid in oil. And of course, the main thing that we really are looking for in oil, its main purpose, is engine protection. So we're always looking to reduce friction, reduce wear amongst the components. So there's some additives that we add to the oils to prevent wear, add lubricity, add detergent. So I think what I think is very unique about the oil market is, as an oil manufacturer, you know, we fully manufacture, you know, R&D, blend, process everything. Our bottle right here in Ohio ourselves. So a lot of companies aren't actually making their own oil, but the few out there that are actually making their own, we're all shopping out of the same catalog of chemicals. So there's nothing to hide. We like to put all our stuff out there. You know, we always like to put our data out and everything, but we're all kind of, you know, going from the same playbook. It's not necessarily the ingredients. Sometimes it's the recipe, but not the ingredients, if you will. But we are unique, I would say, on the base oil side, that we use a Group 4 PAO, and nobody really does that anymore. Some might put a little PAO in just to make a claim, but I don't know of anybody offering a pure PAO. And but on the additive side, you hear zinc all the time. That's a big one.
Yeah.
So ZDDP, which is a phosphorus-based zinc, we use that in our green diamonds and our blue diamonds, level oil, which is our Group 2 and Group 3, and then our Group 4 is the blue diamond. That's an anti-wear. Zinc is a great additive to add to any oil to reduce wear in the engine. And it's also, you have to meet certain specs. You know, the oil manufacturers, you know, not the manufacturers, we are held to different specs that the government puts out to, you know, right now we're on a CK4 spec. It was a CJ4 before that, and they try to get up with the times and keep up with good specs to how the engines are built. Well, the zinc levels are then up to the manufacturers. As long as you're meeting the spec, how much do you put in there? As some people think, if a little's good, then a lot's better. It's not always the case. There's a balance there that you go with. But you'll see, I've actually got a few of our oil analysis of our these are version analysis of our oils. And I mean, in our green diamonds, we run 1,300 parts per million zinc. In our blue diamond, it's 1,600 parts per million zinc. And what you'll see in both of these, they have about 1,000 parts per million phosphorus. Well, that's your Z, zinc, DDP, phosphorus. That meets the CK4 spec, so these can be sold to the public with the stamp on it. It's safe in any diesel vehicle. So you first want to make sure people are, if you're looking at oil, what to get, make sure it's meeting government regulations and they're not shorting you on these type of specs. Everybody should have this stuff publicly on their website. You should make it available. If they're not showing you what's in their oil, then I wouldn't buy it. There's something to be hidden there. Now, after that, zinc and phosphorus, the next big one you always see is calcium. Looks like these are both about 2,700 parts per million calcium. Calcium goes over to that cleansing side, to the base number, the base package that fights the acids. So it's a very common, we're all kind of using that same thing in a way. The amount could be different, the way it's blended could be different, but it's a very common additive package to meet the spec and actually protect the engine and fight acids for that interval. Now, how much do you put in is dependent on, like we said, a group 3 was going to last longer. Well, we need to have enough base to combat the acids for a longer interval. So that might change the amount that you'll see in each one of them. What gets really interesting is when we go over to what I call the dark side, which is when we get into like our adrenaline racing oil. And racing oil is a whole different ballgame because you're not held to, manufacturer specs. These are for race vehicles that don't have emission systems, and you're allowed to pour anything you want in there because, a lot of the really great anti-wear chemicals that you can use in oil just can't make it through a DPF system. It's just too rough on it. Or in gas side of things, a catalytic converter. These emission systems just can't handle these packages that you have. And now it's really good stuff, but unfortunately, we're restricted by a lot of these emission systems that don't allow an oil to be better than it can be. It's another unique thing that people don't know a lot of times too, is what's the difference between a gasoline oil and a diesel oil? Well, really nothing, except that a diesel oil is a much better oil only because we could put more of this good stuff in. We could put more detergents in. We could put more of these anti-wear chemicals in because a DPF system can handle more than a catalytic converter can in a car. So there's nothing different between the package, still base oil, still additive. We can just pour a lot more good stuff into the diesel oil because the DPF can handle more. But it's really fun when you get into a race car that doesn't care at all. There's no emission systems.
Yeah.
And we throw the kitchen sink at it. Like our adrenaline is, 3,000 parts per million zinc, 2,000 parts per million calcium. Now, what's unique about this is our phosphorus is 0. And that's because, and this is kind of one of our secrets, I guess, I don't care. We put it out there. It's public. We actually use a sulfur-based zinc. We do not use ZDDP in our racing oils. The sulfur-based zinc costs a ton, but it's a better anti-wear. And that's why people get they never really see a lot of zinc with no phosphorus because it kind of comes hand in hand with ZDDP. But we actually have no phosphorus in our racing oil at all. But we have 1,000 parts per million antimony. Antimony is like, it is it's the best you can get when it comes to anti-wear chemicals. That combines with zinc gives you ultimate protection. And one last one I'll tell you, which is really unique oil that we have, is we call it our black diamond oil. A lot of people don't know this, and since it's just you and me here, our black diamond oil is really our adrenaline racing oil. So it starts off with all that Group 4 PAO, so it won't shear. The full protection package of our racing oil with the sulfur-based zinc at 3,500 parts per million, 1,100 parts per million antimony, and then we put 7,000 parts per million calcium in there. So what we've done is we've taken the racing package and added all the detergents and base you need to actually run on the street as well. So that's why we considered our street strip oil. We know there's a lot of trucks out there now that are high horsepower builds that aren't trailer queens. They're not just race cars or pull trucks. They're guys that have built really big motors that street drive them, and that are daily drive and are 1,500 horsepower daily drivers. And you really want a racing oil to protect that much horsepower, but there's not many companies out there that offer a racing oil that has the detergent package of a street oil, because we just don't put a lot of detergent in racing oils because they don't go very far. You don't need to put it in there. So our Black Diamond is a very unique oil that we've literally thrown the kitchen sink at.
I think what's so cool about that is, like on this episode, there's going to be a lot of different kind of diesel enthusiasts listening. There's going to be the guys who daily drive it, tow, they're putting a ton of miles on. Maybe they're using it for work. Maybe it's just a daily driver. But then there's also another group where they're that street and strip where they've upgraded the truck, but they're driving it every day, or a couple times a week. And then there's also that other sliver of diesel enthusiasts where it is a trailer queen, and it's something that's 2,000 horsepower, 2,300, 2,500, and it's just going an eighth mile at a time or a quarter mile at a time. And it's really interesting to hear the differences between these different oils that you guys have, because they're totally different uses. Like you mentioned, how many miles is a race truck putting on per year? Not that much, but they're cranking a ton more power, and it's an entirely different set of things they need to protect against versus the truck at 350 or 400 horsepower that puts 20, 30,000 miles a year or more, on that truck.
Absolutely. And we really like to educate people, and our phones are always open here at Hot Shots. We love when people call in and say, we don't care if you buy our oil or not. If you've got questions about that, we want to figure out a good application for you on what you're looking to, what's the best oil for you to buy, the type of oil. And again, people always want to go right down to mileage. How many miles can I get out of this? Yeah. Well, first thing I say is, well, tell me about the truck. What do you use it for? Is it modified? How much horsepower? Does it just go to the grocery store, or do you pull a trailer? There's so much more involved in how many miles am I going, that there's a good oil for everybody. And the back end of that, one thing that I always recommend that I wish more people would do is oil analysis. It is cheap. It is easy. It's like going to the doctor and get your blood drawn. It's the best way to look under the hood, check the health of your engine. We offer oil analysis here. We do it at cost. It's $15 for a basic oil analysis that will show you all your wear metals in there, your particle count, what's going on with, and we do it for any oil. It doesn't have to be our oil. If you use a different manufacturer, that's fine. We still do offer that service. And it's a way to, if after you've done a couple oil analysis, it gives us a trend line. So when I have somebody who really wants to figure out, I don't want to waste a bunch of money on oil, I don't want to buy a really expensive oil, but at the same time, I really want to protect my engine, but I want to get the most out of what I'm buying. Well, let's figure out your projected interval. Let's figure out exactly how your truck's used. We'll start you on a suggestion of oil. We'll take an oil analysis at, say, 3,000, 4,000 miles, if that's your normal interval. And let's take a look at it. If you're good to go, let's go to 6. And we'll take a look at it then. After 2 data points, we can then project about, every truck's different. Every truck puts soot into the oil differently and everything. Now we know exactly at the rate your oil gets dirty. After a couple oil analysis, we can tell you exactly the type of oil you need, how long it can run safely, where you can get every dollar out of that oil, while it's still protecting the engine, but yet not too far where you've gone too far, and you're spending the right amount of money on it, where you're not wasting any money by buying a Group 4 and only going 3,000 miles on it. So it's worth it for every truck out there to do oil analysis. I just can't stress that enough. It's something really important that not enough people do.
I think it really strikes, though, at what makes us a diesel enthusiast, or or why we buy the truck in the first place is, one, we're paying more for it because it's a diesel truck. And especially now, if you look at the price of older ones, they're not getting cheaper, they're getting more expensive. Yeah, or if we buy a new one, they're expensive. And we like the robustness of the engine. We like the power. We like the longevity. I remember way back in the day seeing like those old TDR things or posts about the 1,000,000-mile Cummins, we even see it with Power Strokes and really high mileage Duramax trucks. Is we want them to last. And if we're into the racing side of it, well, we would just put a bunch of money into that truck to make it do and go as fast as it can. And we want to try to maximize reliability. I think that's why oil topics and discussions are so important and they get a lot of traction is I've never met a diesel enthusiast who said, I don't care how long my engine lasts.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, it's all about protecting your investment, and I'll say another thing too, in regards to oil analysis, it's also a great way to, when you're struggling to decide what type of oil to use. If I take my hot shot shirt off for a minute and you're out there shopping for an oil, there's no better way. Like I said, first of all, find this data out. Find out what's in the oils you're looking at. Find out if it's a group 2, group 3, a blend, or a group 4. Find out what the additive package is in there. That's all in the tech data sheets that are publicly made available, so you know what's in there. And then run oil analysis. If you've been using an oil for a while, take an analysis of it. See where it's at. Request a particle count. What a particle count is going to show you is exactly how many parts per million of metal wear you're having in the engine. Now, granted, you're always going to have a little bit of metal wear. That's just, an engine naturally eats itself over time. We want to extend that for 1 million miles if we can. So that's the goal. So one unique thing that you don't see in every oil analysis, now, for example, one of our FR3 friction reducer is our carbon nanotechnology. It's truly the secret behind all of our oils. Will you see it on an oil analysis? Well, you kind of will. I won't tell you where, but well, I'll tell you where. It shows up in silicone, which throws a lot of people off. They think we're using actually a silicone technology. Silicone is actually dirt. If you have dirt in the oil, it shows up on silicone on an oil analysis. That actual test is a light spectrum test, and our carbon nanotechnology actually registers on that same test. So it's not actually silicone; it just actually flags on the same test for some reason. Well, that throws a lot of people off on our technology with the nanotechnology in it, which goes in every one of our oils. Our FR3 does, even our trans fluids and our gear oils. But you'll never be able to see that on tests. Now, other manufacturers use different anti-wear, like you'll see molybdenums on here. So moly, you probably heard of moly. A lot of people use that. That's an older technology of anti-wear. So you can take an oil analysis of your engine oil. If you switch over to a different oil, put another 5,000 miles on it, give it a fair test, do another analysis, go back and look at the wear metals. So everything I've said today, if it doesn't make any sense to you, you don't understand how antimony works with zinc, or how our carbon nanotechnology actually bonds to the motor and reduces friction and all that stuff. I get it. It's complicated. But the proof's in the pudding when it comes down to an oil analysis. And that's usually, as a smaller company like Hot Shots, when we're combating some of the industry giants in oil, people generally are oil loyal. Yeah. It's like, we got a lot of people use our additives, but they're like, I'm sticking with my oil. And I'm like, all right, that's fine. They usually convert over once they've trusted us long enough that they like our additives. And I always say, well, if our additives are improving your oil that much, maybe the oil left something on the table. Why don't we take a look at the analysis? And they'll do a 1 cycle with head to head. And when you see your wear metals drop in half from maybe 50 parts per million in a 5,000 mile interval, that might be iron or copper or lead, some of these components of the engine, and you see those drop down to 20 parts per million. Well, you've just cut the wear in your engine in half. So if that was that engine was intended, you're on a path to going 400,000 miles, theoretically, you're now going 800,000 miles on that engine. That's what's happening inside that engine. When that wear metals get enough and the engine's eating itself enough, that's when they finally fail and they go to the junkyard. But the more we can keep that wear metals down, the longer you're going to have that investment. And the proof's in the pudding when you look at wear metals on an oil analysis. So I highly suggest people do that, even when they're shopping around for an oil or thinking about switching. Give it a shot. Throw it in the truck and compare it head to head and see which oil is really going to reduce your wear the most.
Now, if somebody has questions about this, they want to call into you guys, and maybe they want to do an oil analysis, or they are thinking about switching, or they want to, maybe the truck's brand new and they just want to make sure this lasts as long as possible. What's the best way for them to get in contact with you guys? Ask these kind of questions. I'm sure there's hundreds of questions, specific ones I would never think to ask on a podcast that, a guy's gonna hone in on, because that's how he uses his truck, or maybe has a, experience with some sort of engine failure and he's really curious about something. What's the best way for them to get in contact with you guys?
Well, first off, our oil analysis kits are actually sold on the website. So 24/7, you can go to the website, you can order one. It comes with a prepaid postage. So you buy it, shows up, it's a cup inside a cup. You take a 4-ounce sample, you write down your truck information, seal up the cup. There's a bag that's already got a prepaid on it, and you drop it in the mail. It's that simple. Those usually take, I don't know, anywhere from a few days to a week to get the results of that. Those will be emailed to you. If there's anything critical on those oil analysis, we actually contact the owner directly, and they'll talk directly to one of our tribologists, and we'll walk you through an oil analysis. Even if there's nothing critical on it, it comes back and says normal, everything looks great, continue your interval. If you want to talk to us, our number is 419-947-2647. We're here 8 to 4:30 every day. Again, whether you use our oil or competitors, we don't care. We're happy to answer these questions. We're happy to help you find the proper oil for your application. If you're having an oil problem, we love problems here. That's kind of what we do, is we tackle problems. So it's kind of a fun, it's fun for us here. We enjoy it, really helping people out and finding. Half the time with an oil analysis too, you can spot problems before they happen. We might see a little glycol in there or something and say, you got a head gasket about to go, and it's a lot better to catch those before they happen, So
yeah.
But we're open for phone calls here. You can email us as well. Contact us through our social media, and we will get you in touch with someone that can answer it. We'll get you all the way up to the vice president of R&D if need be. It happens all the time. If something needs to be escalated, that I can't, like I said, I'm not a tribologist. I can help out, but when it goes above my pay grade, I send it to the R&D guys, and they're happy to help people out anytime. That's kind of what we pride ourselves in here for.
Well, what's so fun about episodes like this is how much knowledge there is, and like I said, all I really ever knew was there's conventional, synthetic, but I never knew about the different classes, and I never understood that there were trucks that could go 100, 200,000 miles, or the racing side. It's something I overlooked. And I'm sure there's tons of people out there as well. You walk into a store and there's a whole wall full of oil with different colors and logos, and you're like, well, which one do I get? Which one's best? And then I think the oil analysis is really important as well, just to know what's going on in your engine, and then also to be able to track it, it takes all the guesswork out. I don't have to guess. Well, is this helping? Is it reducing wear? I can get a report and see exactly what it's doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And to tie all that together, even as we've advanced up to making a racing oil, we were never intending to ever make a racing oil. And I credit the Firepunk Diesel for that. They kind of dragged us in screaming into that after using our FR3 in another manufacturer's oil. They said, wow, we just reduced wear and picked up horsepower by adding your oil additive to a high-end racing oil. I'm like, you guys just need to make your own. So what's unique about what started that whole thing into the high performance side of things was we already had some really good technology with our Blue Diamond, which is our Group 4 PAO that I described. And if you remember, the purpose of that oil of a PAO is to go an extreme interval because it can't shear. It won't come out of a grade. So when we always start with a clean slate when we're building any new product. We said, okay, coming to make a racing oil with a blank palette here. Well, obviously the first thing we did is say, we're going pure Group 4 PAO out of the gate. We're the only ones out there that offer a Group 4 pure 100% racing oil. Well, why not? What we found very quickly in the racing side of things is these guys, 2,000-3,000 horsepower, they can shear an oil in an 1/8 mile pass, just like an over-the-road trucker does in 10,000 miles. So the amount of violence they have on that oil and these tight tolerances under that much horsepower, shearing is a big problem. So right away we just went with the same technology we were using over the road, brought it to the racing side of things, and that started the base for our adrenaline racing oils is a Group 4 PAO. And then we just cranked up all the protection packages with it and got us into a whole other market, So it's kind of funny how some of these technologies cross over. what we learned on the big rig side of things helped us out on the racing side of things.
I wonder how many guys are listening right now thinking, man, I've just been throwing this oil in my race truck, not really thinking much about it. And I think that's really cool how, say what Firepunk was doing and what they wanted just spurred this whole other direction to be able to say, hey, you guys can break down oil way quicker than an over-the-road trucker can. Let's put, this specific blend and this particular class of oil into your race truck to protect this engine that, they get very expensive. And sometimes there's money on the line. Sometimes there's, there's tons of things that are out there.
Sure. And the key thing you said there is really protecting the investment. They made horsepower off it initially, which got us going. And pretty much anytime we do a dyno test on that, we make horsepower when switching to our racing oil. And people get really excited about that. Matter of fact, there's a big story recently because Dan Scheid over at Scheid Diesel, I love Dan to death, but he's done things a certain way for many years, so, and I've known Dan for a while, but this off season he contacted me and said, hey, I want to give this stuff a try. And so we sent him some oil and he put it on his dyno with the Scheid Diesel dragster and pulled 60 horsepower and was like, that's unbelievable, and he just got that thing dialed in, he knows exactly what it does. But Dan was smart enough, and that's what I always tell people when they see those type of horsepower gains just with an oil change. That's great and all, but half the time when you're at that horsepower level, these guys aren't using all the power anyway. They can't get all that power to the ground anyways. What that's showing you is that, I always say this, our oil does not make horsepower. It does not create horsepower. It's freeing up the engine to allow for more horsepower because we're reducing wear, we're reducing friction. So at the end of the day, what we pride ourselves in is protecting these engines and keeping them on the track all year, or keeping them on an interval for 100,000 miles, or keeping them on the road for 300,000 miles if you're doing your regular oil changes. We really want longevity out of these engines. That racing side of things, the increased horsepower is really just a byproduct of freeing up that engine by reducing the wear and allowing it to really meet a potential it didn't think it could. And that's really the feather in our cap with how we build the oils, is protecting these engines for the long haul.
Well, I appreciate your time today chatting with us, educating us on oils and what you guys do, and providing just a really interesting conversation, giving us some things to think about as it pertains to our daily drivers or tow trucks, race trucks. And it's always great to chat with you. And like I said in the beginning, I always learn more from these than I did when we started. So it was great to chat with you.
Always with you. Thanks, Patrick.
Don't forget, diesel fans, make sure and head on over to wcfab.com. You can check out the parts they have for your truck. If you're a shop owner looking to offer their products, jump on to turn14.com. They've got a ton of different things you can get to be able to stock on your shelves, or if a customer asks you, and make the process super easy to order. I wanted to give a shout out to a couple of our Patreon supporters, Texas Diesel Supply and Wrights Diesel Services. We appreciate the support that them and all of our Patreons give us to be able to allow us to do the podcast, to be able to improve and do what we do and bring you the stories that you guys want to hear. Until next time, keep the shiny side up.